Okay, action. Welcome to the Paul Pate Podcast. Today's guest is Ryan Claytor, MSU professor, California boy, I take it, right?
Yes.
Formerly a California boy, comic book hero, podcast, brand new podcast legend, Ryan Claytor. Welcome.
That sounds like an oxymoron. A new podcast legend.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. As most things I say don't make any sense, Ryan. You'll quickly learn. Welcome to the podcast. I guess I met you in person at a comic book forum or at Michigan State, and that was really cool. I took my daughter, my 12-year-old daughter, and she was totally uninterested in everything there except for your books. The slice of life, sort of, what do you call it, autobiographical, comic that she somehow related to. So I got her a book, and she likes it.
That's great. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on here, Paul. I really appreciate it. And that's a pretty gratifying story to hear. I remember meeting your daughter, and she seemed like, she was tagging along with Dad, and but it was really nice to talk to her, and it's nice to hear that she found an interest in some comics work, let alone mine. That's really awesome.
Right. And yeah, because there's such a wide variety. It's not all about capes and tights, and you know this especially because you are a comics professor, right?
That is true.
How do you get that job?
Long and winding road, but my wife and I originally moved out to Michigan from California in 2008. She's my wife now. She wasn't then. We were dating at the time for just several months. It hadn't even been a year yet, and we moved across the country together. And she got me a bit of a partner hire while she was at it. I emphasized it was, they told me I could have one class for one semester, and that's all I was guaranteed. So I said, okay, this is the one class that I want to teach. I've always wanted to teach a comic studio course, and I got really close to some places I was teaching in California to getting that on the books. So I proposed that course, and it over-enrolled, and it's been offered ever since. So ever since that time, I've been pushing toward a comics minor at Michigan State University because we have a ton of comics resources here now, which I can get into if you like. But to make a long story short, this academic year, the 2016-17 academic year, is the first time that a comics minor is officially on the books. So I'm very proud.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Audience applause. I would do like the edit with the... That's awesome, man. The only thing I can say is darn. I wish it would have been like that when I was there.
Yeah, me too. I'm trying to create the classes and curriculum that I wish were around going through school.
Yeah. I got a wacky question for you. What do parents think of when their kid goes, I'm going to do a comics minor,
Well, I guess we're about to find out. I've had some really 180 responses from parents once their kids have taken my class in the past. But now that we've got some more classes on the books, we've got this interdisciplinary minor. It's between art and English. And we've got a new advanced comic studio course on the books now that I'll be teaching for the first time next semester. But yeah, in the past, after students have taken my class, I've had parents come up to me and say, I didn't know something like this existed, and I was sort of questioning it when my students or my child took the class. But, I've been really impressed with their enthusiasm and their drive and their follow through, and it was a ton of work. And I know, I put through their paces in this class. It's cool. It's not for the, it's not your passing credits. You really have to.
It's not like bowling or
long out. Right. It's not your general elective.
Yeah. Oh, cool. That is awesome, man. I don't know if I told you this when I was there. Probably not. I took a class called political cartooning back in 1992. Oliver Harrington he passed away not long after teaching the class. He was 82 at the time. He taught just like a one-off course called political cartooning. And
was that an English course?
I don't remember what college that was under. But that was the most awesome experience for me. The only professor I've ever had that invited me over to his place and we had screwdrivers. This is an 82-year-old coolest cat, ever. The guy had great experiences, from way back, and he was funny, anyway.
Sounds like he was tenured too.
No, he was not even a professor. This is a crazy story, but we won't get into that.
Okay.
Let me just say, if you look him up, he's legendary. But he just they just opened up the wall from East Germany where he was in Berlin. And he was like, first thing he did was he came to Michigan State and taught a course, and all he did was just talk about himself, but the guidance counselor said, you sure you want to take this course? Cause he's 82 years old and we don't know what to expect. I'm like, political cartooning, I'm in, but anyway, that was back then. Now, comics is a minor. That's well done.
Thanks.
So now, and by the way, MSU is a great spot for comics because we've got the library, right?
Yeah, so MSU has a special collections library that holds the world's largest public collection of comics in the world. So that's just at the basement of our library, and anybody can access it. You don't have to be a student or a professor. Community members are welcome. And in addition to the Special Collections Library, we've also got the Michigan State University Comics Forum, which incidentally are all these posters hanging behind me. And we're moving into our 10th anniversary of this yearly event. There's a lot of stuff surrounding the event each year, from an artist alley to academic panel discussions, movie screenings, in-store signings. But the headlining event of the show is a keynote speech by an award-winning, professionally practicing cartoonist. Right. And we just secured our keynote speaker for our 10th anniversary, and I'm so excited to tell you all about it on November 1st. We're going to release the information on the MSU Comics Podcast, which leads me to another thing we have here at MSU. So I just started the Michigan State University Comic Art and Graphic Novel Podcast, and it airs monthly at the first of each month, and it runs through the academic year, so September through May, and it will go dark in the summer months from June to August, and then start up again the following academic year. So there are 9 episode seasons, and we've already got our entire first season recorded, so they will definitely be coming out on the first of each month. Yeah. And the first episode's already released. Right. You and I are recording this in late September, and September 1st saw the release of the Sergio Aragones interview. Yeah, which was great. So,
I listened to it, which is just fascinating guy. Yeah, and you did a great job, of course.
Thank you. Yeah, I was so honored and proud to have him on as our first episode. I mean, he's the most awarded cartoonist in all of history. So
I heard that on the podcast, and I didn't know that. I mean,
he's been drawing for Mad Magazine for well over 50 years. Yeah, his creator-owned series Grew for over 30 years. I mean, he's just an absolute industry veteran.
Yeah, I mean, I think he may have put in his 10,000 hours.
Probably several times that by now.
Yeah. So you've got him all recorded. He was the keynote speaker on the last Comics Forum, which I didn't get to go to the keynote speech on Friday night. I got his autograph on Saturday though, which was cool. But you've got them all recorded already out. Yeah. But we have to wait till they come out to find out who you're, or is there a schedule?
I've I've got the schedule. I haven't released it, but
Right.
each episode that's released, I give a little snippet and a preview of what's to come next month. But
Okay.
yes, all of them are recorded. Just to give you a brief hint, most of them are keynote speakers that we've had in the past, but there are some variations to that. So
Okay.
you will see some new faces that have not been at the Comics Forum before.
No, I mean, I think it's good. I'm anxious to know who's next, so it's working.
Yeah, good. Well, we've got Nick Bertozzi coming up for the second
okay.
episode.
Okay.
And we've got this really amazing artifact from Nick. You've listened to the episode, so you know that one of the sections has our special collections comics bibliographer, Randy Scott,
Yes.
who comes on and talks about a particular highlight from the selection.
Right.
In a collection of 250,000 comics, it's hard to know where to start. And so I wanted to have him on to talk about, what kinds of things do we have in here? What are some highlights from this collection? And when Nick Bertozzi was here as our keynote speaker, I got a page of original artwork from him. And when he sent that to me, he also gave me this script. It's a printed out script from one of his underrated gems. It's called Stuffed, and it was written by Glenn Eichler. And Nick Bertozzi took this script that was originally a movie screenplay.
Okay.
And so there's no page divisions, no panel divisions. And Nick went through this entire thing, dividing up dialogue, putting it into thumbnails, and all of that material is there in this script. And
oh, wow.
When he sent this to me, I was just floored and went through the entire book, the entire screenplay, comparing what was there before and after. And it's just this incredible, one-of-a-kind document. And as excited as I was to have that, I thought I should not be the only person to see this. And so I donated that to Special Collections, and we talk about that on the upcoming episode. So there's another preview of what you can expect on episode.
Yeah, that's neat. That's really wild. That has got to be so interesting, because having an experience, I've experienced that. I've, having created a graphic novel and comics, and yeah, it's writing. They're all different art forms that don't necessarily play nice together. It's not a one-to-one comparison. So the work involved in doing what he did in there, I know could be tremendous, right? And then and then you have it there recorded, like, this is how you do it,
right?
Or this is how he did it,
Yeah, and It's interesting to see the pacing and the beats that he would include for comics format that weren't there originally in the script.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting document, and it's housed in archival box that's specifically made for this script. So you could come in and check this thing out.
Check it out. Yeah, I'm going to. That's awesome. Wow, that's really interesting. Okay, let's switch gears for a minute.
Sure.
To your work. Like, if I was going to go find your work, I would find it at elephanteater.com.
Yep, that's one place to find it. I sell it on my website. I sell at conventions. I've been nationally distributed through Diamond Comics, so independent-friendly comic book stores will have my work. So yeah, I try to make it easy for you to find.
And I have to admit, I haven't figured out what Elephant Eater means.
Sure. Yeah, that's a question I get asked a lot. It's a weird moniker. It's the name that I self-published my comics under, Elephant Eater Comics.
Okay.
And it's based on a saying that my dad used to tell me as a kid all the time. He'd say, well, it's like eating an elephant. You just do it one bite at a time, and before you know it, you're done. So I always think about that when I have big projects in front of me, like going through school or creating books, just to kind of keep me grounded and pay tribute to the Pops too.
Neat. Okay, that's good. I felt like there was something that I should be getting, but I could, I'm pretty dull sometimes. Cool.
It's got some personal significance.
Yeah, I like that. As does most of your comics.
Right.
Which, so many people still to this day think of comics as Batman and Superman, Batman versus Superman. Yours are really great. They're real personal stories. You told me that you took and surveyed your friends of the questions, and then you put their answers about you into a comic, which to me would be like devastating. I would never undertake that.
And for that project, it helped to be a little brother because you kind of develop a thick skin growing up. But the project you're talking about was my 6th book. That was kind of a hybrid of autobiography and documentary in comic book form.
Yeah.
And it came about as a result of some research I was doing in grad school on autobiography. And I found this theory which states that autobiography is no more truthful or valid than fiction, which got me thinking, what could I do to make it any more objective than it already is? So I started interviewing a bunch of people in my life with questions about me, only I didn't interview them face to face because I didn't want to influence their responses.
Okay.
So I made these questions in the form of a box of flashcards and put each person in an isolated room with just the box of questions and a tape recorder and let them have at it. So that book is a comic book transcription of those interviews.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. That's pretty neat. Wow. And the art is real. If you you can find it at elephanteater.com, your books, and you can get a good feel for what your artwork looks like. Which I really enjoy it, the style, and then about the podcast, the MSU podcast, the graphic novel podcast. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's the same title as the Minor. The Minor's called the Comic Art and Graphic Novel Minor. Okay. Podcast is called the MSU Comic Art and Graphic Novel Podcast. But MSU Comics Podcast for short works. Okay,
so Google that and we can find the podcast.
Yeah, it's on every conceivable social media outlet and podcatcher site imaginable. We're on iTunes now, Stitcher Radio, Google Play, Intune, podcatchers. We've got a Facebook page, a Twitter account. So we try to make it easy for you to find us. And our official page is at msucomics.libsyn.com. That's where the podcast is housed.
Right.
It's,
okay.
LIBSYN.com. It's short for Liberated Syndication, and it's one of the longest running podcast hosting sites around. Very reputable, and I was happy to.
Yeah, whenever you go, how do I make a podcast? In Google, that's one of the things that comes up is Libsyn.
Yep. Yeah. Sounds like we did the same research.
To be honest with you, I've done this podcast now. I don't even know how I do it. You know what? It's on iTunes though. But yeah, I think I did the same research. So, so I was going to tell you something else, a little story that we have. There's lots of connections. You're from I was going to ask you about. You're from California. You went. Yes. I looked on Facebook. Looks like you're maybe from San Diego, but you went to college in Santa Barbara.
Other way around. So I grew up in a very tiny town called Santa Ynez, California. It's a little inland valley that's about 30 to 45 minutes north of Santa Barbara. So that's where I grew up from the time I was 3 years old to when I went off to college. And I went to school not too far away in Santa Barbara. UC Santa Barbara is where I got my undergrad in art studio. And then I started teaching at Santa Barbara City College very shortly after graduating from undergrad. And I loved it. I loved teaching. I loved interacting with students. And a full-time position came up, and I applied for it, went through all rounds of interviews, and I got second place to this gal who had a master's degree. So I knew if I wanted to teach, I had to go get my master's. So I launched into grad school at San Diego State University. And so then I moved down to San Diego, which is where I met my now wife. And when she got the position at MSU, we came out here, and we've been here ever since.
So how many years have you been here now?
Since 2008, so 8 years now.
Do you like it?
I love Michigan. I love Michigan. I happened into a really fantastic group of friends shortly after moving here because I participated in a 24-hour comic book day.
Okay.
And all those guys that were a part of that day were still good friends today. And it was like an immediate network that I had.
Right.
And so that made me feel really comfortable straight away. And then, being able to teach what I love, comics at Michigan State University, it's hard to get much better than that.
Well done. Cool. The reason I brought up California is because I had a friend that Jim Lujan, that lives in Southern California.
Yeah.
You know him?
He exhibits at Comic-Con International, right?
Probably. He makes little animation movies.
Yeah. The name is so familiar. I'm sure I've seen him. There's about 80 tables in a mile-long convention center.
Right, and he's a tall Mexican guy, so you got to...
Yeah. And, I don't know that we've officially met, but I know of his work, so yeah.
Oh, okay, great. He's super talented and funny guy, and one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. And he's my guardian angel. And he knows, and he lives in West Covina or something like that.
Okay.
He knows everybody, like all these cartoonists down there, Like,
it's a small world. You start to really get to know people as
I was real excited. I said I'm a fan of Steven Silver. I watch his little Monday morning art talks on YouTube, and I told Jim, I'm like, he's doing this thing where you can pay him and he'll look at your portfolio, and I did that, and he's like, oh really? I was just at his house last night. I said, he's a really nice guy. But, he seems to know like everybody. He knows cartoonists all over the country. But most of them were in Southern California at one point or another. Mm. So I was just, curious if you were hooked into that same group. Sounds like
I was a little removed from Los Angeles. I grew up about 2.5 hours north of Los Angeles, and I went to grad school about 2.5 hours south of Los Angeles. So I've done some signings in places like Meltdown Comics in LA, and but I haven't spent a whole lot of time there. So it sounds like your buddy Jim is a lot better tapped into that area than I am.
Yeah, but it's just interesting how things work out. And then I also have a friend I met online. He's Ken Lamoog, who lives in Las Vegas. Mm. And we started corresponding about, what time you draw and stuff, just comparing art or just talking about art and drawing. And he's the one that convinced me to get rid of my paper and use a tablet.
Nice.
So
he must go to Alternate Reality Comics in Las Vegas, right?
Probably. That sounds familiar.
Okay. That's like one of the top 5 comic book stores in the nation, in my opinion. I've signed my books in all 48 contiguous states, and I've seen a lot of comic book stores, and I love Alternate Reality Comics in Las Vegas. If he doesn't go there, I'm guessing he does, but
I'm sure he does.
It's like our requisite stop whenever we go to Vegas. My wife and I will vacation there occasionally, and we have to stop and see Ralph. He's just salt of the earth good guy and carries everything. Like, it's not just mainstream comics or superheroes. He's got manga, he's got alternative comics, he's got local stuff. It's cool. You can't walk out of there without buying something.
Awesome. I'm sure he has. Ken's more into kids books, but he's a great illustrator and writer, and he's super talented as well. He's introduced me to, just online, to the Michigan Comics Collective people, because he worked with Greg Wright, who's part of the Michigan Comics Collective, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with that group.
I've heard of it, and I know some of the guys in there.
But it was just interesting.
About the extent of my knowledge of
it. That's all right. But my point was, like, it's interesting how that worked out. Like, I know they're right here, in the same state. But a guy in Las Vegas was working with one of them on a book, and so he's like, "Hey, you should talk to Greg Wright," and then there, some live in Saginaw where I grew up, which is, not far from where I'm at now. But anyway, it's just a small world.
Yeah.
So the last thing I was going to mention was you have a great job, like teaching. So your wife knows the other guy who has a great job. Like, how do you get a job as a comics professor? Well, then there's another guy who got a job as a soccer professor, and his wife knows your wife, and that's kind of
okay.
Peter is the one that actually alerted me to the comics forum when I went.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so he's like, you might be interested in this. And so anyway, it's kind of funny, but he's Peter's in the history department there at MSU, and he teaches soccer, studies African soccer or something.
Is that Peter Lim or
Peter Alegi?
Peter Alegi, that's right. So he's part of the Afropod podcast.
Yes,
right?
yes,
yep.
Yeah. So yeah, that's just kind of a small world anyway. But cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on and talking about your work, and I look forward I'm anxious to hear the upcoming podcasts over the next year.
You got it, man. I'm excited to release them.
Yeah, and I got one more question for you. So the following year, are you how are you recording those? Are you
in the same way?
Okay.
Most of my recording was done in the first half of 2016. So I think the first recording was Sergio at the end of February when he was here for the MSU Comics Forum. So I was able to have him in studio, and the recording is immaculate. Subsequent recordings are remote, like we're doing.
Right.
I've got this program called Zoom where I can have somebody call in via telephone, and then that pots them into the computer that I'm using, and there's a record function in there. And so the vast majority of them will be telephone recordings.
Okay.
But
it sounds like you're in the same room, right?
It sounds like you're on a telephone conversation with the person at the end. I've had people from New York, from California, from France. They've been all over, and it's nice that you don't have to be in the same room to do something like this, as you know.
Yeah. I have a blast with this, so this is really great. I appreciate you coming on. And
I'm happy to be on here and have a chance to run my mouth about stuff I really like. So thank you for having me on here.
Yeah. It's made my day. So
thank you.
My week.
Back at you.
All right, cool, Ryan. We'll keep in touch, and thanks again. I'll let you know as soon as this is live.
Okay, sounds great.
All right.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate it. Have a good one.